Have you looked at the living room of enough pseudo-celebrities today? It's not peeping because they invited the photographer in, but it still does feel like peeping because I zoomed in on Miss Rachel's content calendar and I'm looking forward to Miss Rachel Pet Rescue. The New Yorker published inside the living rooms of notable New Yorkers, and their criteria seems eclectic, somewhere between Dancing with the Stars losers and Pulitzer Prize winners. We get to see 29 living rooms in New York City, and if the participants are varied, their locations are not. Of the 29 living rooms, 21 of them were in Manhattan, 5 were in Brooklyn, and 3 were in Queens. The Bronx and Staten Island were left out. 25% of the Manhattan locations were in the Upper East Side. The episode of Gossip Girl just writes itself. Hi, Upper East Siders. Agnes Gund's dog wanted to add his own line of yellow to Rothko's 2 greens with red stripe. He didn't have the aim, but the expressions in the room were liquid gold. XOXO, Gossip Girl. Now, this isn't my first time seeing inside celebrity houses. I mean, I voluntarily watched 160 Architectural Digest open door tours. But these are different. I don't have to look at the whole house or hear a celebrity describe the wood they rescued from Idaho. Instead, these photos just show a taste of their home. A couch, a Pee Wee Herman devotional candle, a premium dog playpen, a pair of handcuffs. The New Yorker published this photo series for its centennial, connecting back to an older photo series they did in 1995. That had a few of the same participants, but in that series the subject wasn't included in the photograph, just their living room. And just as the New Yorker reheated their own nachos, I will now reheat their nachos and mix them with my own reheated nachos. They're ready! Here we have it, a spreadsheet of all the celebrities' living room photos, with a special secret tab I'll reveal later. Here I've logged all the things you might have wondered about, but probably didn't. Their age, if they're sitting or standing, if they have fresh flowers, allow shoes in the house, wall color, floor type, pets. There were 7 pets photographed, just under 25% of all photos. 5 were dogs, 2 were cats. And even if you couldn't see the pets, I was sometimes lightly aware of their existence. Like Reverend Al Sharpton standing in front of one of the nicest pet enclosures I've ever seen. If I didn't see that water bowl on the floor, I would have assumed this was for a baby cosplaying as an employee at the Fifth Ave Apple Store. Speaking of the Reverend Al Sharpton, his living room made me add a new column. Have a portrait depiction of yourself. 5 of the 29, 17%, had some creative depiction of themselves that I noticed. Al Sharpton and Martin Scorsese are kind of traditional with paintings. Sarah Sherman has a doll that if it isn't her, we might be dealing with a puppet master situation. Then we have Ella Emhoff with a knit self-portrait. And as kind of the showstopper, Diane von Furstenberg with what looks like a floor-to-ceiling charcoal mural of herself. She is sitting underneath her portrait, and so are 70% of those photographed. Not sitting under her portrait, although it might be big enough, but just sitting in general. 25% were standing, and the reason those two numbers don't equal 100% is because some people completely upended the laws of physics by having one person sitting and another standing. And how do we count crouching? Ideally, we would move on to a new topic before getting into it. If you were visiting, would you be expected to take off your shoes? Well, 44% of the people wore shoes, 50% didn't, and 6% were lucky enough to get a crop that didn't show feet. I could have been a part of that 6%, but I'm not anymore thanks to the sponsor of this video, Bombas. These socks are the ruffle rib half-calf sock from Bombas. I got them in 4 really cute colors. They are comfortable and cute and look good with sneakers, sandals, loafers, even my fancy little heels. I am a big fan of the half calf or the calf socks, so I really like that they split up all of their socks by length, and they pretty much have like every length you can think of. But the coolest part about Bombas, which they say right on the label, is they donate 1 for each pair that you buy. So this purchase equaled 4 socks for myself, but also 4 socks for people who need them. Socks are one of the most requested items at homeless shelters, and that's what originally motivated Bombas to start in 2013. If you've tried to buy from Bombas before, but you live outside of the United States, they've now added a bunch more international shipping. So even if you don't live in the US, you can get them shipped to over 200 countries. New customers get 20% off their first purchase. Just go to bombas.com and use Kendra20 at checkout. Thank you, Bombas. You're my first sponsor. I'm happy to have you. Now that we properly covered how people sit and wear their shoes, it feels like the right time to actually talk about what these living rooms look like. And what better place to start than the walls? There are 29 living rooms shown in these photos, all in different apartment buildings, all lived in by people with different jobs and roles, and nearly all of them have white walls. 25 of the 29. Diane's wall color is not available because it was too busy being a huge mural of her face. But that means 89% of these living rooms have white walls. Does this mean that white is just beloved by all, or does it suggest that no matter how powerful or notable a New Yorker you are, your super is always more powerful? I think it's a bit of both. The entire world is filled with a lot of white living rooms. It's filled with a lot of white rooms in general. Looking at Sherwin-Williams' top 50 interior paint colors, you'll notice a trend. The white wall is doing quite well for itself. But we can't pretend that there isn't also a city living element here. New York City is 69% renters. That's 69% of New Yorkers 69ing in a place they do not own. But I do think a city with a strong renter base connects you with a very specific off-white paint, which you may have seen on landlord specials all around the country. That paint color has found itself on light switches and outlets and probably some dead cockroaches. As you start to trace a lot of these apartments, they have more in common than just white walls. They have wood floors. Every room where you could see the floor was wood or a wood look-alike. But even more noticeable, 25% of those had a extremely specific type of wood floor, the parquet floor. We aren't talking the parquet you can see in the Hall of Mirrors in Versailles. This is the understated, often maligned parquet, famous for being very popular in the 60s and incredibly cheap. It's usually 6 short pieces of wood going one direction, then running into another 6 short pieces of wood going the other. They are often hated for their orangey tone, but you will not hear me talking stick. I love them. You're living in a place with real wood floors. Let's not get too mad that they were being environmental and made use of small scraps of wood, and that those small scraps of wood sometimes give you splinters in your feet. Although this article is about notable New Yorkers, I was surprised how familiar some of these interiors felt. That off-white paint with a bright white on the window trims in Dara Allen's living room. The AC in the window when there are no leaves on the trees in Chase Strangio's photo. The 4 light switches next to each other in Sarah Sherman's living room that I'm sure require intense memorization or possibly cue cards to know what they are turning on. These are the buildings that scream rental. All of those things are done for efficiency and price. A lot of them look like the details I had in my own pre-war apartment. They are famous in New York, but you can find them in cities all over the United States. If you're wondering what war these apartments are truly no judgment, how are you supposed to know which war when you get a new one every decade? In this case, pre-war means pre-World War II, buildings part of a boom from 1900 to 1939. And the reason you hear pre-war every other sentence in real estate listings in New York is because when you look at the building history in New York City, that's when a lot of stuff was being built, especially compared to the rest of the century. So these pre-war apartments are everywhere, and white walls are the renter-friendly paint color. I mentioned that the New Yorker did this article before. In 1995, 30 years ago, they published a piece called New York Living Rooms. The photos were done by Dominique Nabokov and show the living rooms of people you might know and some you have very recently heard of. The Reverend Al Sharpton's living room in Brooklyn compared to his place 30 years later. The difference is pretty astounding, and I'm wondering, is Al Sharpton still a plant guy? Is that pet pen actually a greenhouse and his plants are just on a walk? Or Diane von Furstenberg's living room on the Upper East Side, which still has portraits, but on a much, much more traditional scale. But when you don't focus on those individual rooms and look at the whole, you can see that some of the trends we saw didn't end. 83% of the walls from 1995 are white, pretty close to the 89% from 2025. The ones that aren't white are either wood paneled or wallpapered. But comparing these two portfolios got me doing some pattern recognition. What was I seeing in the 1995 photos that was different in 2025? Well, the 2025 photos sure are clearer, but also the houses look cleaner, a little more perfect, but that might have more to do with the photographer. Dominique Nabokov photographs rooms in a very specific way, and she's famous for it. Her series New York Living Rooms was followed by Paris living rooms and Berlin living rooms. And when she talks about how she photographs rooms, it explains what we are seeing in these photos. In her description, she wrote, "New York Living Rooms is not exactly about interior decoration. It represents a special stylistic and aesthetic approach. It is above all a document. No rearranging, no adding of bouquets, no use of floodlights. I approach the living rooms like I approach the people. I photograph a portrait as close to the reality as possible." And that's what you see in these 1995 photos. This portfolio of Dominique's photos has an introductory paragraph written by someone else. The funny thing is, even in New York, where space is at a premium, people don't really live in their living rooms. They hang out in the kitchen or on their bed or in the room where they keep their books and television and their most comfortable chair. They put the living room together and then leave it alone and drop by when they have company. I'm not sure I fully agree with that today. I think living rooms are TV rooms, so most people I know spend a lot of time there, myself included. When space is at a premium, how could you not use those square feet? But Susan Orlean argues that the living room shows a side of you that others might not know. Once in a while, someone turns out to have a living room that is a complete surprise. The slob who loves chintz, the easygoing guy with the harshly austere furnishings, the friend you thought was just like you but turns out to surround herself with things you hate. This means that either they had bossy decorators or there is a lot about them you really don't know. I'm not sure if there are many surprises in these photos because, again, I don't know any of these people on this list very well, especially not well enough to know if their living room properly captures their essence. But with Dominique Nabokov's pretty bare photos, I get the feeling that they do. The drag performer with the records in stacks on the floor, flowers on the table, and a box fan in the window. A former closeted New York City mayor and lifelong renter with a pillow that reads, "No good deed goes unpunished." An interior designer nicknamed the Prince of Chintz, with bows and nearly 20 dogs staring at you. That secret tab I mentioned earlier is where I logged all 18 of the living rooms from 1995. It's how we know that Staten Island got better representation then, and that the parquet floor percentage seems consistent. When you start to look at the little details of these photos, you see little strings that connect the past and the present. Susan Sontag's sparse but interesting living room in Chelsea reminds me a bit of Julio Torres' space in Williamsburg. But the biggest difference between these two photo portfolios is the 2025 photos are done by a different photographer in a different era. They include their protagonist right in the middle of them, worried that you might not care about Lin Manuel Miranda's piano if you couldn't see his face. They are bright and well lit and thoughtfully composed, and although I think it's rude to take the concept without the original artist, I understand why they did it. It's playing off what works in the interior design space now. We've seen it for years. I've seen it 165 times. How the Architectural Digest open door tours put the celebrities in the center of them. It no longer seems like enough to just take a photo of Diane von Furstenberg's living room. Now it's much more compelling to include her in it. And although I am critical, I like that you have notable New Yorkers in these photos. I like seeing people in the places they live. I've been thinking a lot lately about taking photos in your space. How when I look back at old photos and see my relatives who aren't here anymore, I'm seeing them, but I'm also seeing the spaces that aren't there anymore either. How you don't realize how 50s or 70s or 90s or 2020s a place looks until you see it from the future. Now, I hope these people have other photos of themselves in their homes and not just these ones where they look like the most relaxed version of a person who has a piece of parquet floor up their ass. I really hope more of them are smiling in their homes than these photos portray. Some of these are legitimate frowns. According to my chart, it's only 14% who are smiling. But I do like the reminder that comes from both of these photo series. The 1995 approach, where it's worth photographing your space even when it's messy and the lighting's not ideal. And then the 2025 approach, where you're in the photos, even if you're frowning. Capturing a photo of you in a place you know well. And it's probably even better if it doesn't get dissected in a spreadsheet. If you think photos of notable people's houses with them in it is cool, let me introduce you to this photo of Sarah Orne Jewett at her writing desk, and then to the photo of me at Sarah Orne Jewett's writing desk. I went on a tour of her home for my podcast, Someone Lived Here, and the latest episode is on YouTube with video elements that might remind you of a Nancy Drew video game. If you haven't seen it yet, I hope you'll like it. You can always support me on Patreon, where I'll be sharing the spreadsheet I went through to all tiers, along with a video describing the method to my madness. Thank you all for being here. Bye.